A single red light blinked atop the studio camera. In that frozen heartbeat, no one inside WB News San Antonio knew they were stepping into a night that would shatter boundaries. The studio air was sharp, humming with a silence more deafening than noise. Jasmine Crockett adjusted her earpiece with a calm precision, fingers tapping a steady rhythm on her coffee mug. Across the sleek glass table, Karoline Leavitt opened her notebook, pen poised like a blade ready to carve the narrative. Behind them, the giant screen lit up in bold, blood-red letters. America divided. The struggle over Trump's legacy. One night, one truth, one nation holding its breath. The moderator, Cole Matthews, a slender man with the nerves of a stretched wire, leaned forward into his microphone. Congresswoman Crockett, he began smoothly, many Americans believe former President Trump is a victim of a rigged system. How do you respond? Jasmine didn't flinch. Her voice, clear and commanding, sliced through the sterile air. Freedom of speech doesn't protect deliberate lies that corrode trust in our justice system. Cameras caught the slight narrowing of her eyes, the lean toward the mic, the quiet fire burning in her gaze. Across from her, Karoline flashed a smile. A little too sharp, a little too staged. You're ignoring the real grievances of millions, Karoline countered, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with steel. The first collision of words struck hard. Tension climbed the walls. The fuse had been lit, and there was no going back. A tremor ran through the studio, subtle at first. A vibration only the most attuned could feel. The viewers at home didn't see it yet. But inside WB News San Antonio, the battle line had already been drawn. Jasmine Crockett sat forward, voice tightening just enough to sharpen every syllable. Real grievances, she repeated, almost savoring the words, deserve real solutions, not ego-driven fantasies wrapped in flags and falsehoods. Karoline's smile thinned, pulling tight across her face like a mask under strain. She tapped her pen once, twice against the table, trying to reclaim the rhythm. Cole Matthews, sensing the gathering storm, leaned in, desperate to steer the conversation to safer waters. But it was too late. Jasmine turned fully toward Karoline now, her body language open but unyielding. The room chilled. "Let's talk about fairness," Jasmine said, her tone slicing cleaner now, stripped of ceremony. Fairness looks like a black teenager in Detroit serving time for stealing a backpack, while a former president hoards classified documents and walks free, painting himself as a martyr. The studio held its breath. A bead of sweat slid down Karoline's temple. She dabbed it quickly with the back of her hand, hoping no one noticed. The cameras noticed everything. Jasmine pressed on, calm but relentless. "It looks like families in Kansas City losing generations of wealth to corrupt officials, while white-collar criminals sip cocktails at country clubs." Behind them, the giant monitor flickered. Real-time tweets began flooding in. Crockett clapped back. Truth on trial. Hashtags multiplied like wildfire. Karoline, jaw tightening, scrambled to write something in her notebook. Her hand visibly trembled. Jasmine wasn't finished. She pivoted back to the audience, both the silent studio and the millions watching at home. "I'm not here to comfort the comfortable," she said, voice low, deadly calm. "I'm here to speak the truth, even when it hurts." The words hung heavy in the charged air. It was a thunderclap without noise. Cole shifted uneasily in his seat, clearing his throat, preparing to pivot the conversation. But Jasmine wasn't giving him the opening. She leaned in again, voice dropping into an almost intimate register. "When fairness becomes selective, it ceases to be justice. And when the truth feels like an attack, maybe we need to ask why it hurts so much." A murmur ran through the rows of tightly packed chairs in the studio. Someone coughed. Another adjusted their mic nervously. Karoline tried to rally. "You make everything about race," she began, voice sharper, desperate. But Jasmine cut her off without raising her tone. "I make it about reality." Silence. Stone-cold, unblinking silence. Karoline blinked rapidly, fumbling with her water bottle. The plastic slipped from her hand and clattered against the table. She froze, humiliated, the noise echoing through the studio like a gunshot. A production assistant darted forward to clean up. The camera zoomed closer, catching the fraying edges of Karoline's polished persona. Jasmine waited, silent but mighty. Her stillness screamed louder than any words. Karoline, forcing composure, tried once more. Americans deserve leaders who unite, not divide, she croaked. Jasmine's smile was sad, almost tender. Americans deserve leaders who tell the truth, no matter how inconvenient it may be. Cole glanced off stage. Producers were frantically gesturing. Cut to commercial? Stay live? The ratings were spiking like they hadn't seen in months. Inside the pressure cooker of WB News, there was no turning down the heat. Jasmine took one final breath, slow, measured, and delivered the blow that would be replayed endlessly over the next 24 hours. Fairness doesn't mean silence in the face of injustice. It doesn't mean protecting powerful men while punishing powerless kids. If standing for the truth makes me divisive, so be it. I'd rather fracture a lie than mend a broken system with empty words. And just like that, Karoline broke. Her hand dropped to the table. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. A tremor coursed through her arms. For one terrible second, she seemed to search the room. For a lifeline, for an exit, for air. And then, without warning, she slumped sideways. The studio gasped as one. Cole shot up from his seat. Jasmine, momentarily startled, remained frozen. Karoline's body crumpled against the polished desk. Pens clattered to the floor. Her microphone slipped from her jacket. Producers shouted orders into earpieces. A medic sprinted onto the stage. Camera one caught it all. The collapse, the panic. The undeniable moment when performance gave way to stark human fragility. The feed stayed live. Millions of Americans from New York to Nebraska watched in real time as the unthinkable unfolded. Jasmine stood there steady, unflinching. Not triumphant, not vindictive. Simply present. Because sometimes the truth doesn't shout. It stands still, waiting, while the world around it falls apart. For a moment, time cracked wide open. Karoline Leavitt slumped against the table, her body folding unnaturally. The silver microphone she wore tumbled down. The small crash amplified across the eerily silent studio. Cole Matthews froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. A low gasp rippled through the rows of producers, technicians, assistants, a human wave of stunned disbelief. In the control room, someone fumbled for the cut to commercial button, but another quicker hand stopped them. The ratings were spiking, and everyone knew it. The feed stayed live. A medic stationed backstage for emergencies no one ever truly expected rushed into frame, a black bag bouncing against his side. He knelt swiftly by Karoline, fingers pressing against the side of her neck, searching, confirming, moving into action. "Give her air," he barked. Cole staggered backward, bumping into his chair. Jasmine, still at the table, remained still, statuesque, her heart hammering so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't know whether stepping forward would look like cruelty or compassion. Outside the glass walls of WB News San Antonio, the protesters who had gathered earlier now pressed closer, sensing something was wrong even before official news broke. Inside, chaos reigned, but only behind the cameras. The main feed, the one broadcasting into living rooms across America, stayed locked onto the raw, electric, unbelievable moment. A congresswoman, fiery and righteous, standing motionless while her political opponent crumpled under the heat of truth. It was unbearable, and yet no one could look away. In homes across the nation, millions sat bolt upright. Parents who had been half watching while scrolling their phones suddenly dropped their devices. Teenagers who had dismissed politics as boring leaned forward, wide-eyed. Bartenders muted games and turned up the volume. The collapse of Karoline Leavitt wasn't just physical, it was symbolic, visceral, a live public reckoning. In living rooms and offices, in diners and gyms, Americans collectively experienced the same instinctive reaction. Something monumental was happening. Jasmine finally moved. She stepped back, giving the medic room, her microphone brushing lightly against the desk. A young production assistant rushed in with a water bottle, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. More staff appeared, moving Karoline carefully onto a stretcher. Her face was pale, almost translucent under the studio lights. Her breathing was shallow but steady now, the medic confirmed with a curt nod. As they lifted Karoline away, one of the camera operators instinctively followed, zooming in. Someone from the control booth screamed into the earpiece, "Pull back! Pull back!" The feed blurred briefly, then snapped back to Jasmine Crockett, standing alone at center stage. She didn't try to fill the silence, didn't grandstand, didn't offer platitudes. She simply looked into the lens. The weight of what had happened, of what still might happen, hung between her and the millions watching. When Jasmine finally spoke, her voice was softer than before, measured, almost sorrowful. The truth isn't violence. It isn't hatred. It's a mirror. And sometimes when you finally look, it breaks you. No theatrics, no applause lines, just pure, raw honesty. Backstage, the network's legal team scrambled. Phones lit up across newsrooms nationwide. Headlines were already drafting themselves. Breaking. Karoline Leavitt collapses live on air. During heated debate, Crockett versus Leavitt. A nation divided, a moment captured. Did the truth cause the collapse? Twitter caught fire. TikTok flooded with stitched clips. Dueling narratives, wild speculation. Some celebrated Jasmine as a truth-teller of historic proportions. Others accused her of cruelty, of breaking a fellow woman on national television. Even as paramedics loaded Karoline into an ambulance outside the studio, opinion wars had already begun. Inside her private dressing room, Jasmine sat stiffly on a leather couch, hands clenched between her knees. The adrenaline still flooded her system, but beneath it, exhaustion was setting in fast. Her chief of staff, Dana Rowe, paced anxiously, phone pressed to her ear, whispering fiercely into the receiver. Jasmine stared at her reflection in the vanity mirror. Her makeup was flawless, but her eyes gave her away. Behind the sharp eyeliner and professional polish, there was an ocean of fatigue, a lifetime of fighting not to be silenced. A knock sounded at the door. It opened before Jasmine could respond. Cole Matthews poked his head in, his usual polish stripped bare. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. Jasmine only nodded once. She wasn't sure she believed him, or herself. Outside, the protests had doubled in size. Some held signs praising Jasmine Crockett for standing tall. Others waved banners accusing her of political brutality. Reporters clogged the entrance. Microphones raised like weapons. Every step Jasmine took from here would be magnified. Every word twisted, dissected, devoured. And yet, she felt strangely calm, not triumphant, not devastated, simply certain. Whatever storm was coming, she had already crossed the point of no return. She would not apologize for speaking the truth. Not now, not ever. In the early hours of the morning, the ambulance carrying Karoline Leavitt finally pulled away from WB News. Her condition, stable. The network issued a cautious statement citing stress and dehydration, but the damage was done. America had seen too much, heard too much. They could not unsee a woman shattered by pressure. They could not unhear Jasmine's steady, scorching indictment of injustice. The genie was out of the bottle, and there was no putting it back. Later, as Jasmine sat quietly in the back of a black SUV, watching the burning orange of the Texas sunrise creep over the city skyline, her phone buzzed with thousands of unread messages. Support, hate, offers, threats. It didn't matter. She had spoken. The storm she unleashed would reshape more than her own career. It might just reshape an entire nation's conversation about truth, power, and accountability. And no matter what came next, Jasmine Crockett was ready to face it, standing, unbroken, unapologetic. The sun had barely cracked the horizon over San Antonio when Jasmine Crockett realized the world she had known was already gone. Overnight, her name had scorched its way across every news feed, every television screen, every whispered conversation in America. Some headlines crowned her a hero. Crockett, a new voice for accountability. The Congresswoman who refused to blink. Others vilified her. Did Jasmine Crockett go too far? Collapse on camera, the human cost of political warfare. Inside a dimly lit cafe on the east side, Jasmine sat slouched over a chipped wooden table, a black hoodie pulled over her head. Opposite her, Dana Rowe, her chief of staff, her shield, her friend, scanned an endless stream of notifications on two different phones. "You've gone nuclear," Dana muttered, half in awe, half in terror. Jasmine didn't respond. Her coffee sat untouched, the surface cooling, mirroring her own numb exhaustion. Finally, Dana set the phones down, meeting Jasmine's weary gaze. Dawn rose over San Antonio, but it did nothing to calm the chaos from the night before. Inside Baptist Medical Center, Karoline Leavitt lay motionless on a stark white bed. The heart monitor beeped steadily, like a metronome tapping on the fragile cracks left in her mind. The chief ER doctor, a middle-aged man, pulled down his mask as he stepped into the press room. "Ms. Leavitt is suffering from psychological exhaustion and temporary neurological imbalance," he announced curtly. "Her condition is stable but needs close monitoring." Reporters jostled for space, cameras flashing relentlessly down the sterile hallway. Sometimes a person's collapse becomes a feast for the emotionless recording machines. Meanwhile, across the city, Jasmine Crockett's name flooded every television screen, every news headline. Hero or villain? America more divided than ever. TikTok played Karoline's collapse on an endless loop. They slowed down every blink, every tap of her pen, every clenched jaw before she fell. In slow motion, it became a macabre work of art. One side hailed Jasmine as the living truth. The other denounced her as political predator. Truth on trial, stand with Jasmine. Compassion matters, trending nationwide. In a private conference room, Jasmine sat before her laptop on a silent Google Meet call. On screen appeared Senator Alana Brooks, one of the most respected clean politicians alive. "Jasmine," she said, voice rich with gravitas, "if you want to go farther, now is the time." The window was cracked open. The morning breeze rushed in, stirring love, war, and doubt in Jasmine's heart. She simply nodded. Behind the scenes, political puppet masters scrambled. They didn't care about Karoline or Jasmine. They only saw opportunity, public outrage, vulnerability, fertile ground to elevate their own candidates. "Don't let her become a symbol," one whispered. "Use Leavitt's collapse to gut Crockett's credibility," another urged. Outside WB News San Antonio headquarters, thousands gathered. Some held signs, "Stand firm, Crockett." Others wore masks emblazoned with "Truth hurts but heals." Among the sea of faces, a 17-year-old girl raised a handmade sign, "Thank you for speaking for us." 3 days after the incident, Karoline Leavitt returned to national primetime. Her eyes were still red. Makeup could only mask so much. "I don't hate anyone," Karoline said, voice cracking, "but no one should be broken for political points." Some of the public leaned toward her. Others turned away. The next morning, fresh headlines exploded. "Crockett, hero or bully? Leavitt's comeback, humanizing the collapse." WB News announced an emergency debate, "Truth and Power." Jasmine Crockett knew this wasn't just a debate. It would define her career and perhaps reshape how society perceived truth itself. The night before the debate, she met Dana Rowe in the green room. "Don't punch down," Dana warned. Jasmine smiled lightly. "I'm not fighting shadows, I'm shining a light." The WB auditorium was packed. Lights blazed, cameras rolled. Jasmine strode onto the stage in a deep blue suit, a symbol of trust and calm. Karoline Leavitt was already there, clad in a delicate beige dress. The moderator maintained solemn silence as he introduced the topic. "The truth hurts, but it also heals." Jasmine began. Her voice fell like steady rain against wooden floors. "Truth isn't a transaction. Truth is facing pain head on." She turned slightly toward Karoline, but her gaze held no malice. "If telling the truth hurts people, maybe we need to build a society where truth doesn't have to hurt." Karoline opened her mouth to counter, but hesitated, then withdrew. This was no longer a contest of sound bites. This was a battle of conviction, and Jasmine won, without a single personal attack. That night, riding in the back seat of a black SUV, staring out at the glittering city lights, Jasmine knew one thing for certain. Politics might be a game of power for many, but for her it was a battlefield for truth. She sent out a single tweet: "Truth isn't a weapon, it's a journey. Walk with me." It was the beginning for anyone who would never again be afraid to speak the truth. "They're organizing protests outside every town hall you're scheduled to attend next month," she said. "Some calls for resignation, others begging you to run for Senate." Jasmine let out a hollow breath. "Because I told the truth," she said, not asking, just stating. Dana nodded grimly. "Telling the truth makes you dangerous, Jas. You make people feel things they don't want to face." Outside the window, the city stirred awake. Mothers walked their kids to school. Street vendors set up carts. The world spun on, indifferent to the firestorm brewing around one woman's name. Later that day, standing alone in her hotel room, Jasmine stared at her reflection. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Eyes shadowed but fierce. Shoulders tense but steady. She wasn't broken. If anything, she was sharper now, honed by the collision between reality and the myths people told themselves to feel safe. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Dana. "Courthouse steps. Hundreds already gathered. No press. Just them. They're waiting for you." Jasmine hesitated only a moment. Then she zipped up her jacket and headed out. Santa Fe, New Mexico. The federal courthouse loomed ahead, clean and solemn against the brilliant desert sky. There was no stage, no podium, no microphone, just people. Hundreds of them. From every background, every shade of skin, every walk of life. Standing quietly, waiting. Some held homemade signs. "Truth matters. Justice for all, not just the powerful. Stand firm, Crockett." They weren't here to be entertained. They weren't here to be placated. They were here because something inside them had been cracked open too. Jasmine climbed the courthouse steps slowly. Halfway up, she turned. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't chant. They simply stood taller, shoulders back, faces open. Jasmine swallowed the lump in her throat. She spoke without notes, without rehearsals, without filters. "I didn't come here to create headlines," she began, voice carrying in the crisp morning air. "I came here because too many people are told every day to sit down, to be quiet, to shrink themselves for the comfort of others." A ripple ran through the gathering, silent but seismic. "Telling the truth isn't cruelty," Jasmine continued. "It's an act of faith. Faith that we can handle reality. Faith that we are strong enough to change what's broken." In the front row, a young boy perched on his father's shoulders clapped quietly. Others joined. A slow, steady beat. Not a roar, but a heartbeat. Afterward, people approached her. No cameras, no fanfare. A woman in scrubs squeezed her hand. An elderly man with deep lines on his face tipped his baseball cap. A teenager with a cracked phone whispered, "You said what my family never could." Each touch, each word, built something inside Jasmine. Not armor, not ego, something deeper, something real. That night, back in her hotel room, Jasmine sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through messages. There was hate, of course. There were threats. There were lies. But woven through it all were stories, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. A mother whose son spent 18 months awaiting trial for a crime he didn't commit. A veteran denied housing while white-collar thieves built mansions. A teacher fighting against policies designed to silence uncomfortable truths. Their pain wasn't theoretical. It was blood deep, bone deep. And they weren't asking her to fix everything. They were asking her not to forget. Jasmine leaned back against the headboard, fatigue weighing down her limbs. She closed her eyes, letting the exhaustion crash over her, but not erase her. There would be consequences for what she had done. There always were. But the cost of silence, she knew now, was far greater than the cost of speaking. She wouldn't back down. Not for a headline. Not for a poll number. Not even for safety. Tomorrow the fight would continue. Tomorrow the storm would rage, and she would stand in the center of it, unshaken. Because somewhere in the cracked concrete of America's broken promises, new seeds were being planted. And Jasmine Crockett was ready to water them with truth, no matter the cost. What side of history will you choose? Speak your truth. Share this story. Subscribe for more voices that refuse to be silenced.